and energy was kind of, my eyes were opened, I don't know, about 12-15 years ago. I joined a 3-day course down at the Human Performance Institute, which is now owned by J&J, but it's a 3-day course down in Florida, and it really teaches you how to manage everything from mindset, movement, building capacity. You know, it's not about exercise. Recovery is a big part of building your capacity. And so we're going to explore a number of those things today. And I love this topic because it's one that we all know we need to give attention to, and we back burner it all the time. So my goal today is to just raise some awareness on a couple different ways you could look at it. And hopefully after our session day, maybe there's 1 or 2 things that you'll take away and say, yeah, I'm going to try that. And hopefully it'll give you a little bit of a boost somewhere along the energy and capacity front. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And again, thank Joe and Mario here. And we are going to get started. And let me just check. Everybody okay? They can see it all right? Awesome. Okay. All right. So capacity and energy actually help us sustain our performance, right? I think we all intuitively know if we've awakened and we haven't slept very well, the ability to show up with, you know, a sharp mind, or even being empathetic to someone else usually is minimized because of some of those things. So sleep is certainly one way to do capacity. But I'm going to focus on a couple of other things. Let me just start and remind everybody that our whole framework is around who we are, how we're showing up, and then how we relate to others. How we show up is underpinned by the energy and capacity. It'll change the whole dynamic of how we think, of how we approach people. So it's truly important that we do it. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on capacity, but I love this quote. This guy is on my personal board of advisors. Sandy Ogg was the former CHRO of Unilever. He was at Blackstone. He has his own company now, but Mario and Joe, you might appreciate this as much as I do, but this is his quote. In my 20s, I thought the scarcest resource was money. In my 30s and 40s, I thought it was time. And now that I'm over 50, I know the scarcest resource is energy. And so I feel that. We probably all feel that. Here's what I want to say, though, on this. Without energy, very smart people resort to their default habit. And you know what that default habit is? We get crunched, we get pressure, we know we have to get through the snake in the belly sort of syndrome. And instead of taking care of ourselves and managing our energy and capacity, we go, oh, this is only for a short period of time. Let me just get through the other side and I can get back. You know, if I have to give up my workouts for a week or 2 or a month, I can manage that. And that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. When you need to get through something that requires a lot of capacity, the cadence and the modulation of how you're doing that is super, super important. So I just want to ask Joe and Mario, look, the higher up you go, the more capacity I think you need. What are your pro tips for preserving that energy or bringing more energy to your role? Joe, can I start with you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, there are a lot of different aspects to this. You know, in my opinion, of course, this is just my opinion. Welcome to feedback and questions as well. So I'll come at it from a couple different angles. One, you know, the obvious one, I think, is any kind of physical activity. I mean, for me, you know, get a quick workout in the morning. That does help. But I think we talk about that quite a bit. So I guess the angle I'm going to take here is that less is more in a lot of ways, in terms of, what you want to have going on and focus on, and how you schedule your day. So what I mean by that, and I probably included this in every one of my performance evaluations this last go around with PC2. And that is, we get caught up in scheduling these meetings and our activities back to back, and it's the whole day is taken up, and we think we're being really productive and we're getting a lot done. But if you kind of reflect back on your day when you do that, toward the end of the day, how effective you actually were or what you were able to accomplish, you probably weren't as good as what you were early on in the day. So what I've actually asked my people to do, is, and I almost require them to do it, you need to schedule in time during the day where you don't have a meeting or you don't have something to do. When you get to a certain level, there is a component of that, although what we do is tactical a lot of times, thinking about, what you just did or getting ready for your next session with whatever the interaction is going to be, you need to have that period of time to kind of get ready for that. And it does recharge your batteries a little bit. Because when you're in a senior leadership position, every interaction you have, people, they are taking what you say seriously and they're acting on it. And you do want to kind of be at your best. And it's tough to do that when you're just coming off a meeting and you're stepping into another one. So I've actually told my people, less is more. It's okay to decline a meeting. You need to prioritize your time. And you need to build in time in your day to not only evaluate what you just did, but just think about what you've got coming up. So being deliberate with how you manage your time in your day, I think is extremely important. And, less is more. And that there's a lot to be said for that. If you're going to do it well. And it's hard to do it when you've booked yourself nonstop throughout the day. I said, you're probably overestimating what you're actually getting done when you do that. So build in some free time, and don't be afraid to decline an appointment. If it doesn't make your priority list, you're just not gonna be able to do it.
Yeah, love that comment, Joe. Thank you. I think that is so great. I mean, just the intentionality of creating that space is so important. Thanks. I love that one. And I'm glad that you're imparting that on your team as well. Mario, what tips or things have you found that work for you?
Yeah, it's funny that Joe talked about the calendar. You mentioned back to back when we first started the meeting. And I'll talk about triggers a little bit, like understand what your triggers are. Because that's really what sets your day, right? So a trigger for me is my calendar, believe it or not. Like the double bookings, the triple bookings drives me absolutely insane, especially when it's internal people who actually can see my calendar, because we actually have the free busy there and they're double booking or triple booking me, and I'm figuring out, but do you really want me at this meeting? What is the intention of the meeting? If you're inviting me, you obviously don't want my input because I have other things going on that time. So I get a little sensitive about my calendar and making sure, because it's trying to allow those gaps to be able to either reflect on what just happened in a meeting or prepare for the next meeting, right? So I actually do, if it comes from my calendar, it's actually 25-minute meetings instead of the 30-minute meetings, just so I have that potential to have that 5 minutes in between. And then I also block areas of my calendar, as the day goes on, as the week goes on, it's more taxing, more tiring. So, I like to do that. Just to give myself some free time. Again, more stuff that Joe talked about. But the other point for a personal side is to be able to recharge. I preach a lot to my folks, my staff, my team about vacation time. There's a reason why we have it, and we need to take it. And I'm probably one of the worst at it. I just got off of vacation, which was glorious, but I'm kind of the worst. But before that, I can't remember the last time I actually took a vacation. So. The recharging is really important. Several times a year, it's extremely important to be able to close the laptop, put away the email for some time. I think is just not just, your personal health, but your family's health, the people, your friends, the people around you. So I think that's probably just as big as, time management.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. It does impact relationships, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, so I love that you added that element in there. All right, thanks. We're going to delve into this as a group here. But here's what I did here and led right into this, and they didn't see the slide, but you can't be exceptional if you're not intentional, right? So we're aware that we're back to back. We're aware that we're stretched, but unless we're very intentional about, as Joe says, blocking that time, or Mario ensuring that the meetings aren't the traditional Microsoft Office 30-minute, 60-minute, and allowing some space and some time to reflect and walk away, then it doesn't change. I always like to say that your health is actually a leadership strategy, because I think it's hard to be a good leader unless you can bring that energy in. And I know you guys feel like this. You're drinking out of the fire hose, right? But the fire hose now never stops. It is full capacity, I think, all the time. And so figuring that out is going to be important. So what I'd like to do is do a little group brainstorming here. And I'm going to have you shout it out, and I'll take some of the ideas. But I want to use a capacity analogy here. So you all are in an organization that has manufacturing, so this should be easy for you. So the analogy is, you have a manufacturing plant. You need to get more capacity. And without spending any more money, because you got a finite asset here, just like you as a person, how do you create more capacity for a factory? What are some of the things that you would do? Let's get some ideas, and I will jot them down.
Aggressively prioritize.
Prioritize, Aditi. What did you say something before that?
Aggressively.
Aggressively. Okay.
I'd say that you need to take a step back and look at how you might be able to do things differently or more efficiently, so that you
Okay.
can have a higher output.
Okay. Increase efficiency by redesign.
Identify your bottlenecks.
Yeah. Identify bottlenecks.
Add a shift, add hours.
Say SNIG again.
Then add a shift, add hours to the day.
Add hours to the day.
A shift. If you work a 2-shift,
Okay.
add a 3rd shift.
All right.
Link-
What else?
Link the design and remove the waste.
Remove waste. Yeah.
Create a stop list.
Aditi, I'm sorry. Say that one again.
Create a stop list.
Stop list. Stop this. Yeah.
So for some of these things, it might be pulling your suppliers into this as well, right? If they need to do things differently, right? I think a couple of the examples you would ask your suppliers maybe to get involved too.
Okay. Any more?
Ask for help.
Ask for help. All right. One more idea. Anybody?
Well, I would just said it ties to all of this, but in coming up with some of those details, make sure you're talking to your team, right? Because they might have thoughts and ideas on how to do things differently.
Yeah. Team communication, idea generation. All right, this is a great list. So we've done this little brainstorming quite a bit, and here are the common ones that come up, and you guys, I think, hit all but maybe one. So here's what we're looking at here. Let me get my cursor. Come on. There we go. So some of the things that came up, you guys had, I think, Lisa, you had the bottlenecks, maybe cut non-essential lines, increase automation, reduce waste, schedule downtime. It's really easy when you're looking at a factory, a mechanical thing, to say, well, let's do this, it's operational management and so forth. But what I want to do is say, all right, how do we apply this to us as humans? What would be those same things, right? We have a finite capacity. What does that look like? And here's what has come, in the brainstorming along these side, and which I would love to just focus on, this is not an exhaustive list. If you did this for yourself, you would come up with a really long list, but here's some ideas around that. So it's, overcoming perfectionism, bottleneck is a perfectionism, guilt is a bottleneck at times, prioritizing, delegating, setting boundaries, practicing self-care. There may be other analogies here. What else are you thinking of? I know, Joe, you were shaking your head. What else would apply to a human that this conjures up for you?
And I didn't see, you're right, I didn't see these slides, but this is, we do this every day. So I'm going to pull on a couple of comments that were made and kind of bring it together here, the way I think about it and the way that I do share with my team. So Sarah, you mentioned bringing in your suppliers. So when you think about the organization as a factory, that's really your people that work for you. I mean, those are your suppliers. That's your team. And if we really want to be efficient, it's the way I kind of think about it, and create capacity, well, then you don't want to do things twice. So you don't want any wasted movements. And to be able to do that, everyone needs to be on the same page. And the way that I kind of share that with my team is you say, look, let's make sure that we are exercising a professional courtesy. And by that, I mean, be prepared when you go to a meeting. So that kind of falls in line with what I said previously. And let's, when we make sure if we're going to spend the 30 minutes or the 90 minutes or whatever, it's productive. And I share this with everybody the first time we get together as a new team. I'm not going to ask twice. And it's not about being too disciplined or I guess mean about it, but let's just have the professional courtesy. If I ask for something or I'll reciprocate that, it's one time and then we get it done. So it's really all about efficiency, because although, I work closely with Snig every day, and it's kind of funny, she mentioned the extra shift, but I personally don't want to work the extra shift, right? I've got a life outside of work and I want to make sure that I've got enough time for that. And if we're efficient with all of our steps at work and we do things one time, but we do them really well, then we get to become really efficient, and we do create capacity by doing that. We end up doing a better job. So a lot of it, I think, is good, crystal clear communication. Everybody understands the expectations. We ask one time and we get it done, and we're not just checking boxes. If we're going to get together and keep the time, let's make it worth our while. So everything everybody said, you kind of tie it together. I mean, the factory is really our organization is really all it is. You just got to be as you possibly can.
That's great.
So in order to do it really well and do it the first time, one of the things I don't see is upskilling, training, focusing on your people so that they can learn to do it right and do it well one time.
Yeah, for sure, Lisa. And that's a great ad. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's stimulating your thinking. And that's what I want to do here. Any other thoughts around what this might stimulate for you personally, or in the, personally or professionally, in the office or out of the office?
Well, I'd say, when I think about my team, they do a lot of development, but they do a lot of operational, and they have to deal with customers. And when I look at things like reduce waste, I think a lot of, are you spending too much time doing something? Are you doing something that another team is supposed to be doing? Right? There a lot of times I see that they're trying so hard to help, but sometimes they have to take a step away and say, look, you can do a warm handoff, but you don't have to do the work. Right. So, that's where, to me, I take that and I could apply it to my team, and I do on a regular basis, but, reduce waste could mean a lot of different things. Right. So,
yeah, for sure. Those are great extra comments. Thanks for those. So I'm going to just take these, again, not an exhaustive list. You all came up with some really great ideas there, because when you think about leadership in your teams and eliminating redundancy, it looks like Snig dropped off, or she's coming back in. Being productive, and we'll talk about even managing the calendar as well. Snig, welcome back. It looks like we lost you. And the upskilling and the training and, crystal clear communications, those are all benefits to building capacity for the individuals, but also even the capacity for the team, right? If the team has crystal clear communications, expectations, they all know what to do, which is really difficult at times, right? As a leader, to make sure everybody kind of knows what they're expected and what to deliver, but that also increases the efficiency of the team. Let me pick off a couple of these, and I'm going to say, overcoming perfectionism, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but mostly on prioritize and delegate. And then I'm going to talk about just some ways to create some personal capacity. And one is having bookends in your day. I'll talk about that. And then, of course, a little bit about self-care. And then we'll put all this together. At the end, we'll do some breakouts. Perfectionism holds us back as a leader. Any comment on that as to why I say that? Why does it hold us back as a leader? The desire to be a perfectionist.
I would say the time involved to do things perfectly versus, the needs that you have to do more and have a larger scope.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Lindsay. Thanks.
I would say,
Allison?
actually, that I think if you're trying so hard to make things perfect, sometimes you think that only you can do it the right way, and therefore you do too much yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Love that. Any other comments? Why does it hold you back?
I believe it holds you back from making progress. And now, Joe, you say this often, progress over perfection. And I think the whole world's now moving to agile. You try a small piece of work, implement, and see how that goes. And if it doesn't go so well, you adapt, make changes along the way.
Yeah, those are great comments. I would, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I will tell you that when I was in my late 30s, and I strive to be a perfectionist, and I realized what was holding me back is because I always set my bar at a certain height, knowing I could achieve it. And so I didn't really experience much failure. And we all know that if we're not making mistakes, if we're not failing along the way, if we're not stretching ourselves enough, we're not really growing as much as we possibly can. And so I think it held me back as a leader on my growth trajectory for a while. Any other thoughts on perfectionism?
Hey, Carol, so I'm gonna jump in here and make a comment. So Snib was actually kind. They normally make fun of me for saying this, but don't let perfection become the enemy of good or better. There's a lot of progress to be made. And if you're constantly trying to be perfect, one, it takes too long, and two, you'll probably never get there. It's very difficult to be perfect. It's never going to happen. So in a lot of ways, better is good enough. There's a lot of, you advance a lot, so just don't let perfection become the enemy of being better.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I said I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on this. I think we all conceptually get this one. It can tend to bog us down. But what I do want to spend time on is prioritization. And so I want to start with a story. And the story is about something I call the power of three. So in my earlier career, I ran a private membership for CEOs. And I had all my CEOs, and one of them, who was his first time role as a CEO, got fired. And he wanted to come and share with his peers why he got fired and what he learned, which I thought was pretty amazing. And so you have this first-time CEO being very vulnerable to a group of 35 CEOs. And here's how he described the story. He said, I joined the company, I was 18 months in. The chairman asked me to meet with me. And the chairman says, Brent, you're an amazing talent. Had vision for this organization on how we would turn it around. Had high hopes for you being successful in that. But I have to tell you that in 18 months, you've been trying to do so many things that you have had no impact on anything. and we have to change the CEO. And so what Brent was describing was the learning for him was something he called the power of three. And that's a common thing when we get a new role, we want to maybe prove or show all the ideas and all the things that we're able to make better. But what I think we really need to focus on as leaders is that we can do 12 things really well. But what is it about you and what things that you bring to the table that drive unique value? What are those top 3 things that you and only you really can do? Not that your team can do, but you can do. And so identifying your power of 3 really has you thinking about, where do I make the most impact for the company? And then sitting down with your manager and saying, hey, here's where I think I can make the most impact for the organization. Is that aligned with what you think I can do as, you know, the most impact for the organization? And then you really should be thinking about, are you spending most of your time on those areas where you can drive the most impact? And so what Brent learned was not only deciding what those things were, but communicating them over and over again and making sure that his priorities lined up with delivering that impact. So when I suggest this prioritization, you all can do many, many things. And that's the, you know, the perfectionist, I think, attitude that underpins that is just because you can, should you be doing those things. So as you look at your role, I want you to think about, where do you create the most impact? Where do you create the most impact? And I want to just give you a minute. Look, this is not going to give you enough time to jot those 3 things down, but give me one. Just jot down for yourself, out of your entire role, one thing that you know should be your priority and where you're going to drive impact. So I want you to jot at least one thing down. If you have 2, go ahead. Let me give you a minute or so to do that. But when we leave here, I want you to do that on your own. And I'll tell you why here in just a minute. What's the one thing?
So Carol, I can jump in while you're giving them time.
Please do, Mario. Thank you.
Just to try to talk about what I do on my team and what I've done for years. You know, part of the cybersecurity team is, we do a 3-year cyber strategy, which is great. You know, but it's great to have a strategy, good pie in the skies type of thing. But, you know, we kind of focus on the implementation of that strategy. So it kind of forces each of my tower leads to think about what's important to them. You know, Lou Holtz's what's important now type of theory, right? So they get to think about for the year what's important in their programs, and then they get to prioritize, you know, what it is in their programs that's important, to make sure we can drive, whether it's business functionality, you know, the security of whatever it may be. So anyway, we kind of really focus on the implementation and this, you know, the business priorities, what's important to each of those groups. So it's pretty valuable.
Well, I think that's great. And Mario, do you do anything in terms of also lining up where the enthusiasm and passion is of the people on the things they want to drive? Because that helps capacity as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, they own it, right? They own their portion of it. So, you know, we try to encourage, you know, that, you know, what they want to get to. Now, you know, some of the things are there's another list, our Nirvana plan, right? So some of the things are there that we can't quite get to, whether it's a funding or capacity or things. But, you know, I think we do talk some about that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great input. All right. So everybody have at least one thing. All right, the one thing that you came up with is probably like the number one thing, right? It's probably because it came to mind so easily, you know, you're driving that. What I would have you all do is open up your Outlook calendar for the month so you can see it. And I want you to look at what's happening in that calendar. So here's the idea that I want you to think of. As you look at that calendar, this is another CEO story. Veronica Hagen has this power of 3 concept approach as well. And she would come in on Monday morning. She would have her assistant print off her calendar. She would look at the week or the day, and she'd circle everything for that week in blue for her number 1, circle every meeting in green for her number 2, and every meeting in purple for her number 3. And then she'd hand her calendar back to her EA and say, cancel everything that's not circled. Now, I know as a CEO, that's a little bit easier to do, right? But the concept is important. Because if you look at your month calendar, your week calendar, and you've got your big 3 things that you're prioritizing, how many things on that calendar can you circle related to your big 3? Are you spending an inordinate amount of time on things that aren't where you're going to be driving impact? And that's a great way to examine how you're setting up your calendar. Because I know I have found that because you have these calendars that are open to the world, Mario's double book, triple book, they're open to the world. What happens is someone calls you up, Christine, and they'll say, hey, Christine, I want to have a meeting. And Christine will look at her calendar. She goes, oh, I'm open between 2 and 3 on Thursday. Okay. And then it fills up. And then someone else will go ahead and schedule something. They see something available at Christine. Oh, she's got 4:30 open. I'm going to schedule in there. And what happens is your calendar gets scheduled versus getting designed. Meaning that as long as you have space, it gets full. And so as you think about your calendar, as Joe started out here, creating space in the intentionally creating space in the calendar in your day that's private, that's sacred, that is for you to be thinking, preparing, reflecting on what's happened. Because I'm going to be a little abrupt when I say this, is where you all now in your level of leadership, you're being paid to think, not just do. And if you don't have thinking time scheduled and in your calendar, and everything is filled up on doing things, I'm going to tell you, Otis is overpaying you. I'm just going to be that abrupt, because you all are at a level of leadership where you're smart, you have experience, you have a point of view that needs to be shared, you have a voice and some thinking that needs to come. And that's what builds the capability of Otis and the ability to innovate. And if you're not making those contributions, then you are underserving your organization. And the way to do that is Joe's original thing here. You have to be intentional about creating that space and that time to be able to do those thinking and preparation to bring your point of view to those meetings. All right, I was very abrupt on that. What do you all think about me getting in your face with that? All right, Joe.
So, I mean, it's not really a question for me. It's a question, and I would like to hear some feedback from the group on this. But Carol, I mean, you hit it exactly. I mean, you are too expensive to be booked up all day doing tactical stuff. You've got people to do that. You've already proven you can do that. You are at a level in the organization that the reason you need the extra time to assess and evaluate where you are, where your people are, is that you've decided whether it's 3 business priorities or what you're trying to get to. Every move you make throughout the day, if it's not one step closer to that, well, then you shouldn't be doing that, or your people shouldn't be doing that. And your people are going to take direction and guidance from you. And a lot of times, you know, if you don't have time to kind of step back and see what's going on, you could have a lot of wasted motion out there with people working really hard, but not getting a lot done. I kind of liken that to they're like on a hamster wheel. They're working really hard, but not getting any place. It's your job to make sure that every movement they're making is a step closer to whatever your desired state is, or whatever your goals are, whatever your priorities are. But as a leader, you know, the big value you're adding and what you're getting paid a lot for is to make sure that the organization is getting constantly closer to what the desired state is. That's kind of the way I phrase it to my folks, but that's an effort to do that. And that's a constant effort because a lot of things happen throughout the day, and it's your job to make sure that everybody is operating or doing stuff that's adding value, where we're not double working and things like that. So and it's impossible to do that if you're in constant meetings and you're actually in the middle of it all the time. It's impossible to do it.
Right. Yeah, good comment. Mario, were you getting ready to jump in there?
Nope. I'm waiting to hear comments from everybody else, like Joe.
Okay. What do you all think?
I agree completely. And I think it's something that is easier said than done, especially I spend a lot of time trying to filter things for my team as well, right? Because we have so much coming from all angles. And so really I'm trying to help create that space for my team as well to direct them. Here's what's important. Here are the priorities. Here's where you can say no. So it's kind of ironic that it takes a lot of time to actually do this, right? To preserve time. But I think it's well worth it and kind of a constant work in progress to do so.
It's messy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Yeah, Christine?
Sometimes I go to do this and then I feel guilty that I'm not available for my team if they need to have me on a meeting or want to catch up. But also sometimes if I let them go to a meeting that I otherwise would have attended, it might empower them to start being able to lead those discussions on their own and then brief me after or come to me if they need any assistance with follow-up. So it's probably good for the team if I'm not on every meeting with them as well.
Great observation, Christine. That's a great way to develop your people. Let them go in your place for sure. Other thoughts?
I was going to say, for me, thinking time is sometimes group thinking time, brainstorming with your colleagues, with your team members or peers, just to get different perspectives. And just as an example, if I'm trying to think of a better way of doing something, improving a process, I think getting different views on why we do it the way we do, what can we change, how can we improve, just getting various ideas together in one session is more productive for me than just thinking by myself. And I'd rather align and brainstorm with others than spend separate individual thinking time. That's needed too, but on some areas, group thinking is better than individual thinking.
Yeah. Great add there, Snig.
Hey, Carol, can I ask Christine a question?
Yeah.
Something she said. So the guilt factor, because this was something I was going to bring up in terms of providing direction and delegating and so forth. So when you said there's a guilt factor, so what did you mean by that? I think I know, but I'd like to kind of react to that a little bit. So what did you mean by that, Christine?
Sorry. I meant that I felt guilty blocking off the time. And then if I'm needed for a meeting, they would think I'm unavailable or that I'm not being there for my team enough. But I think maybe the opposite would be true as well, that I'm empowering them to go on a meeting on my behalf and come back to me if needed. But I do feel guilty blocking my calendar if I'm needed for something.
Yeah, I actually, the reason I kind of picked on that is because early on for me, I felt guilty like that. It's almost like, well, you're delegating and you're lining people out, but you're not in there actually doing it yourself. And that's completely understandable, especially, like I said, I dealt with that early on. But over time, you are getting paid to do that. That is the job. And people want to be led. They want the direction. They want the clarity. They need to be given a chance to actually go out there and get the job done in their way, as long as you give them the parameters to go, to go work within and get it done. So that is a big piece. And that is I think almost everybody goes through that. My team, I try to coach them up on that as well. You can't feel guilty about providing direction and leadership. Again, they're not getting paid to actually do it anymore. They're getting paid to lead their teams to go get it done. So, and there's a difference there and there's a transition, but so I'll just say it directly, don't feel guilty about that. And Carol's right, it's what you're getting paid for, getting paid a lot to do it. And you just need to go ahead and do it. Your team will respond. And I don't think they're not going to look at you and say, well, you could be doing this. That's not the job anymore. It used to be, but it's not anymore though.
Yeah, great comment. And Christine, you brought it to life because that delegate word, I mean, the guilt comes in and like, oh, if I don't like to do this, they probably don't either. And yet I always say the D word is a develop, right? And a lot of times those are folks that want to develop in that area. We just think it's something that, well, we don't want to do, so they probably don't either. So I liked that you said, you know, both sides of that the guilt side was delegating, but the good side was someone else was getting a chance to develop. It's a good mindset to put into it.
I'll chime in. I think some of the guilt, because I shared, you know, like the guilt, you know, to Christine, like I've had that too. I don't think it's as obvious. I don't think we see this like modeled, like taking this time to stop and think. It's not obvious, like coming up that that's what other leaders are doing, right? And I think there's, like, I always had more of a perspective of, oh, people are bouncing from meeting to meeting to meeting, and like you've got to be just busy and go if you're important. And if you're not, and if you're sitting there, you know, sitting there staring off thinking, right? Like I've never seen somebody doing that, right? I've never walked by like any leader's office and seen them doing that. You just see people kind of go. So I think some of that is, that's where maybe some of those expectations and that guilt and what we think is normal or not normal maybe kind of comes from too.
Yeah, good point. It's hard to role model thinking. For sure.
You know, I've never felt guilt. You know, I always thought it as empowerment, you know, autonomy, development, you know, some of the words we've already used, as long as while doing that, we're empowering our folks to make that decision for us, that they don't have to come back. That's the autonomy part, right? You have a program, you run your program, you make the decisions for your program. If there's any course corrections, we can do that as a group, you know, or a team, you know, but they have to feel that the decisions are theirs as well.
Yeah.
I have a comment, Carol, from my side. Prioritizing your personal energy also requires, and Allison, I think, has spoken about this internally when she's delivered a couple of these things. Your personal time, whether it's exercise, dropping off kids, and I have a global role like several others in the company. So my mornings get very cluttered and my evenings also get cluttered. But if I don't take the time to actually put exercise or dropping off kids or picking them up on the calendar, everything becomes a mess.
Right.
So I used to feel guilty doing that, but I don't anymore. And when someone finds that spot, they want to grab it, you have to take a stand and say no, because you have to protect that time for your own sanity. And that was hard for me initially, but I think I'm getting better at it. You have it, like Joe said, right? It's a constant struggle though, because you have to keep reprioritizing. But that for me was a personal, just, you know, this is my personal time. If I don't do this for my sanity, I'm going to wake up and not even have time for coffee because my first meeting is at 5:30 a.m. I mean,
I'm glad you brought that.
Yeah,
That's a great comment. We're going to talk a little bit about bookends. I would leave you with this on the calendar. It is designing it. In fact, they say successful people don't have to-do lists. They do everything around the calendar. And so how many of you are morning people? Raise your hand. And then the others, I'm assuming, are at the end of the day. You've got to also know where your energy height is. So if your energy high is in the morning, when you're designing your calendar, you should be designing your calendar so that the hardest things for you, where you need the most energy, you're putting those in the morning. Just don't make it random. If you're more of a high energy at the end of the day, then that's where you do them. You schedule in things in your calendar that give you energy where you're at your low point, right? So when I'm, you know, having to write or create or do that, those are my morning, you know, activities. In my afternoon activities, doing, you know, interviews or webinars or things like that give me energy back, you know, the other people. And so I try to also design my calendar for that. But Aditi, you're right. The first priorities on your calendar are those things that are the necessaries, the child pickup, the 2 nights of dinner with my family, the annual doctor's exam that, you know, we can let slide if we're not doing that carefully. So the calendar intentionality is an important way to create capacity. The other
Carol, I
thing,
just wanted to throw one more thing in on the calendar, because we all talk about it, people on our teams, they invite us to all these meetings and people are throwing things on your calendar. I make it a habit of reaching out. I'll take a look and see who else is in that meeting, right, that works on my team, and reach out to them and say, do you need me here? Right. And it gives them a chance to take a step back and like, yeah, you're right. I probably don't need you there. Versus, they're inviting more as a, thinking that I have this need to be there, and making
Yeah.
sure they realize that I'm empowering them to, to handle it. So.
yeah, great point, Allison. Thanks for that add.
And on the
All right.
automatic piece with the calendar, a lot of you probably already know this, but I just do the automatic 1 hour of focus time every day, and it doesn't always end up that way. A lot of times it's my save space that I end up, putting an urgent meeting in that space. But either way, there's a lot of tools, if you look at Microsoft Digest, that can automate from the meeting times that Mario mentioned, right, to focus time, and just a lot of great tools. So I'm big on the automation piece. I think it's really helpful.
I think the automation is great, and keeping true to that time that you're carving out. I have 3 or 4 people that put stuff on my calendar, and in order for me to, I used to say hold, and that got scheduled over. And then I used to say, something else, and that got scheduled over. And the only thing they didn't schedule over when I had a meeting with someone else. So I would put, Joe Robinson, right? Meeting. The only problem with that, every once in a while I'd get to that, I go, who the heck is Joe Robinson? I have no idea why he's on my calendar. But make sure that you're protecting some of that space. I think that's a key message here. And that the thinking time, I think we all agree, you all need to be very intentional about that. All right. I don't know if you've heard of Parkinson's Law. Anybody heard of that? Just be aware, this is kind of fun. Parkinson's Law is whatever amount of time you have to do something, you will fill it up, basically, is what that means. So I'll give you a quick example. You get asked, or some emergency happens and you got to take a flight and you got to catch the next plane. I bet you can pack in 5 minutes. But if you don't have to leave until tomorrow, that packing probably takes, who knows, maybe you go out and get another makeup kit. I don't know, but you tend to fill up whatever space you have if you've got that amount of time. And it's the same with the things that you're doing from a business standpoint, right? If you can, the notion here is, the recommendation is, set your calendar, set your clock. I'm going to work on this for 45 minutes, and then I'm going to take that 15 minutes for other time. But if you don't plan it, again, it's all around intentionality. So anyway, that's Parkinson's Law. We touched on this a little bit, and it was about delegating. And I love this quote because I think we sometimes forget as leaders just to give our people space. Now, I know Joe had talked about this, but if you give people space, they actually will fill it. There's sometimes a guilt factor that, oh, I've got to leave the office, or I have a sick child and I need to be out for a couple days and I can't do that. I think your people love that opportunity to step up and fill the space. If you ask them, here's my situation, here's what I'm dealing with, and you'd be surprised how many people, oh, let me take that, let me do that, we'll take on this. And I think sometimes we're hesitant to ask. I think that came up even in the capacity brainstorming, we're hesitant sometimes to ask for help. So I would encourage that. All right, the last area I want to turn to is really around boundaries and self-care. And boundaries is simply a concept of this. Make sure that you bookend your day, meaning that you have a period in the morning that's yours, whatever that looks like. You design it, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes, and you do the same at the end of the day. It's kind of like an on and an off ramp, and that helps create more capacity. So, one of our signature grads took this to heart. What happens, and maybe some of you do this, before you even get out of bed, your mobile phone is next to it and you look at it and you go, oh no, some issue has come up. especially if you have those global roles. And now all of a sudden you're already starting to think about it, problem solve it, maybe get angst about it. And in this particular example, Chrissy said it changed the way she interacted with her family in the morning before she even got out the door. So a problem's there. She's got to solve it. She's already working on it. She's telling her kids, hurry up, mom's got to get to work, right? And so this bookend concept really is helpful in ensuring that you can create some capacity for yourself. So with that, I'm sure you all have some habits and things that you do. You know, they say at the end of the day, you shouldn't be, it's about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes space between blue light. So not being on anything electronically before you go to sleep, writing, having some space before you go to bed so your mind isn't whirling. But the concept of bookends is written about frequently now, and about having that, 10-minute morning, 10-minute evening, focused on yourself. Does anybody employ this habit right now?
Ever since I started bullet journaling.
Tell us
End of
about
the
that,
day.
Lisa.
Well, at the end of the day, I have my notes from all my meetings. I have to write it. If I type it, it doesn't somehow enter my brain. So by writing it, and a dot is an action that I have. So for tomorrow, now I'm going to write all the actions that I need to take. And if I end up at the end of each day, 3 days in a row, and I haven't done that yet, I either need to create space for it, or it's just not a priority. And then in the beginning of the day, in the morning, I read, here's what I need to accomplish today. And I'm not saying I'm good at it at all. This is still fairly new for me. And even creating the space to do that in the beginning of the day and the end of the day, I find I'm not as successful when I don't take that time. But with anything, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, but you're thinking about your mindset, and that's an important part of capacity as well, is preparing your mind for what you're trying to achieve today, as opposed to just entering the day and going through those back-to-back calendars. That's great, Lisa. Anybody else employ that to share a tip with the rest of the group?
One of the things that I started to do after COVID and working from home, I felt like the days would just drag on. My computer was always on and the day never ended. I'd go downstairs, my kids would be here, but I was still online. So at the end of the day, I actually shut my computer off and I put it away. I'll check my phone to see if anything critical has come up. And obviously, if I take meetings in the evening because I'm in a global role, that's fine. But I make it a point and I share with my team, guys, I turn my computer off at the end of the day because you do need to have that balance. And so that's my end of the day bookend.
Yeah, I love it. What do you all think of this concept if you're not employing it? Do you see even a 10-minute window at each end that could be helpful?
Yeah, I don't do the morning one, but especially in my last role when I was working fully remote and also during COVID, I struggled because I would have meetings right up until the end of the day when my nanny would leave. And so I'd have to run downstairs and all of a sudden switch into mom mode. And it was really tough to, just always frantic every day. And so I tried to build in 15 minutes and I would use 10 minutes to just do any last emails that I needed. And then I would do a 5-minute calm meditation. And it was always, hard to get that in, but I just told myself, look, it's 5 minutes, and it would really just clear my head to kind of transition to that next phase, and then tell myself, look, I can always go back to do emails once the kids are down, but this is, kind of a transition time. So that was really helpful when it happened.
I love it. It doesn't take a lot to actually get the recovery. I mean, 5 minutes can make wonderful things happen. Go Chase, sorry, it looked like you might have gotten knocked off there. Welcome back. All right, so the last concept before we do our breakout is, and we've touched on it already, but this is around creating the space. So I you know, am guilty of filling in a lot of space and not allowing enough time for thinking. And my daughter was in Nicaragua for 7 years, and Sunday was always our, you know, FaceTime moment. And she would ask me on Sunday, well, what are you doing today? And I had a long list of things I was doing. And she'd say, Mom, why are you doing so much on Sunday? That's what a weekend is for. It's the end of the week. You're supposed to be, you know, spending time resting. And she said to me, you know, not doing is actually doing. And I said, yeah, but that's kind of hard. She goes, okay, well, take 30 minutes and find something, you know, that you like to do for 30 minutes. And if you put that on your list, and then you can check that one off too, and it might feel better. But I think the notion here is, you know, not doing is actually doing. It gives you that space, that time to think, to reflect, to innovate, and to recover. So if you've watched any professional sports, their recovery time is as coached as their on time. So you look at a professional golfer when they're really good, or a professional tennis player, you know, when they go to the bench between change of sides and they're sitting down, that few minutes of recovery time is critical to their ability to change sides and get back on game. So that is such a mental spot, an emotional spot, an ability to regroup. And in a very short period of time, identifying where those moments are and training yourself to use that as recovery time. And I think we're often faced with our calendar, oh, well, how do I carve out an hour? I can't. I would tell you that you can do recovery time in 5 minutes. So let me ask Mario or Joe, as you think, you know, do you have a recovery tip that you love to employ?
You know, as I'm listening to the discussion, I mean, for me, it's just I try to compartmentalize what I'm doing. So if I'm thinking about work and I'm working on work, well, then that's where my headspace is. But it benefits me to kind of step away from that. And whether it's 10 minutes in the morning or a workout in the morning or some period of time during the day, for me, it's important to compartmentalize it and step away from the action just for a little bit, because it does allow, at least for me, to gain some perspective, because we get caught up in the day-to-day at work and it seems like the most important thing in the world. It's not. And when you step away and your mind goes someplace else, whether it's something with the family or just anything else, compartmentalize it. And then when you get back to it, understanding that it's not really a life or death situation, it does allow you to kind of calm down, make a good decision, move forward, provide direction, and then you move on to the next challenge of the day, because there's always going to be challenges of the day. But I do think it's effective to compartmentalize your thinking and your time. So when it comes time to make a decision, you can do it, and you don't, you know, yeah, it's important, but it's not as important as what it really is, what you may think it is. To gain some perspective, help yourself make better decisions, in my opinion.
Yeah, good comment. Mario, do you do any tactical things to help you on recovery?
Yeah, so I mean, like during the course of the days, funny, Kate brought up working through, well, several people brought up working through the COVID years. You know, I would, you know, recharge, whether I was doing something at the gym, the Peloton, whatever it may have been, like right in the middle of the day. I would, you know, block out some time. You know, sometimes it was in a meeting, you know, sometimes, being totally honest, other times it wasn't, you know, but I, you know, really for recovery, I do some reflection during the days. If there's just some decisions that have to be made, I might pause on them. But I think that recovery things have kind of evolved, right? For me, it was always, what's the happy place? You know, where's my happy place? When I was younger, my kids were younger, it was whatever they were doing, right? It was soccer field, the theater, whatever it may have been. I found myself being able to recharge, you know, watching them doing something that they enjoy. Now, as I'm a little older, you know, what activity is where I recharge, whether it's in the garage, whether it's on the river, whatever it may be, right? So I think that's probably where I'm able to recover, and really where I'm able to make final decisions on things, or reflect a little bit more on things.
I love it. I love your comment about happy place, and that kind of leads into the example that I have to share with you too. I had back earlier in my career, I was in a manufacturing organization, and this goes way back into the 80s. So the CEO of our company, that was back in the day, you had the big heavy wood paneling and big wood desks and dark drapes and everything. And I was in his office and, sitting across from his desk, and I noticed on the corner of his desk, he had a box of crayons. And I said, Carter, why do you have a box of crayons on the corner of your desk? And he said, pick it up. And I picked it up, and he said, open it. And I opened it. He says, now smell it. And so, Mario, when you think about your happy place, when you smell, a fresh box of crayons, it takes you back to childhood. It takes you back to play. It takes you back to that fun place. And that was his trigger, used in a different context there, Joe. But that was his trigger a couple times a day. If he needed a moment just to catch his breath and needed a moment to kind of think, he'd pick up the box of crayons and just smell it and take himself back, to his happy place. And so my point here is it doesn't take you to have to carve out 30 minutes on your calendar. Mario had a happy place. You all probably have one of those. If you have something that's a trigger that would help you just remind yourself to take yourself away, I think that's really important. Because if you can just change your physiology, you change your psychology. Even if that's getting up and walking to the window and looking out the window and coming back, it doesn't take a lot. And those little things actually have pretty big impact. So change your physiology to change your psychology. So I loved the crayon idea, and hopefully you all have something that's a good reminder of maybe taking you away as well. So we've gone through a lot of ideas today. We've talked about capacity and energy, and we've talked about trying to prioritize, really designing our calendar a little bit differently, thinking about bookends, triggers that help, either take us away or remind us of things that we got to do, and having some thinking space. I think we hit that one pretty hard as a group. So what I'd like to do is we're going to put you in breakouts, and we'll have 12 minutes. And in your breakout, Samantha, do we have 2s or 3s? How did you design that?
Groups of 2.
Okay, groups, you have a pair then. So let's do 10 minutes then. And so you'll have 10 minutes. And here's what I want you to do with your partner. I want you to think about 3 actions that you can do very intentionally and they can be simple ones that will help increase your capacity. And then I want you, the third bullet, which is, where can you be intentional about recovery? Just pick, a time in the day, once a day, where you can be intentional about recovery. And then just discuss, how will I know I've been successful in implementing them? How would you think you'll feel or realize that you're successful in that? All right. So 3 things to help increase your capacity. We had lots of ideas. 1 place that you could put recovery in your day, and then how will you know? So 10 minutes, and I'll see you back here in 10 minutes, and we'll just see how that went. And Joe and Mario, if you want a 10-minute break, feel free to take that. We'll let you know when the 10 minutes is about up. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I think we have everybody. How did that go? What did you, not specifically what you decided on, but just how did that process go with the partner and trying to be intentional about this? Anybody want to enlighten the others on how it went for you?
Yeah, Christine and I were talking, and Christine gave me some really cool tips. I'm really bad about blocking my calendar because it's always booked anyway. So blocking it really doesn't serve a purpose, but maybe it does. So I'm rethinking that now about creating time for me to think, blocking my calendar for that. And she gave me some cool tips on how to implement that. Uh, and I was sharing with Christine about my recovery time during the day. If I can find time between my meetings, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a meeting ends early, is to change my physical space, get out of the room because I work remotely out of my home office all day, every day. Just leaving my office, getting out, even if it means walking in the driveway for 5 minutes, that's good enough for me to change my physical space and refresh my mindset. And even though I see that there are emails that I need to respond to, which I can do in that 5-10 minute space, I purposely put that off so I can get out, not think about work for 5 minutes, again, recharge my mental batteries and come back and respond, be more productive that way.
Yeah, great. Good. I'm glad that was helpful. Any other thoughts on how that worked for you? Helpful to be more intentional?
For Lisa and I, we definitely, she shared a couple tips about the increase the capacity I can take, like focus on circle the most important thing. I know Joe is here. I always have to say billing is very important. So if the billing meeting, I will be there, and then I'll have to delegate others. Sorry, I just like to pick on Joe. So I was very helpful. But we actually both struggle a little bit. How do I know I'm successful on implementing them? We struggle a little bit. That actually is a reflection. Say, oh, I was not reflecting it. Am I doing this enough? But so I'm hoping to hopefully see any about others have idea. But we were talking about maybe we feel refreshed, or hey, maybe we actually have more. I say I have more time to think the strategy. I never had a time before. But I'm happy to open to hear anyone have anything else, because we both struggle. Like, what I know is I'm successful.
Yeah. What did everybody else think? Well, how will you know you'll be successful in that?
I think we said, we should feel better, and, we should be driving better results. But I guess in terms of actually like measuring and quantifying that, I don't know that we got to a place of being able to do that. Right.
Yeah. I think you'll know. How do you think you'll show up differently?
I think with more energy.
It'd be more
Do you
present.
think other people will see it? Yeah, I have often found, and I know Kate, you've gone through the SELECT program, that when people employ some of these things, that it's actually noticeable by either a spouse or someone on their team that they see a difference.
I think it's obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think the flip side of that is you're so rushed and harried and busy, and people see you, whizzing by, as opposed to, having a moment or two to, have a little bit of a sense of calm and energy that you bring to the table.
That's difficult, though. I remember my first job at the Bethlehem Steel account. Bethlehem Steel doesn't even exist anymore. And I can remember walking around. And one of the first things I learned was don't ever walk around without a piece of paper in your hand. You need to look busy. You need to look like you're whizzing by, because that's how you're showing value. And I know saying it out loud, it is so contrary to what we say now, but as your first professional job and what's instilled in you, and the fact that those people aren't even around anymore because Bethlehem Steel wasn't successful, it's hard. It's hard to get by and say, yeah, I'm going to look more relaxed, and while my team is whizzing by, I'm going to look very relaxed and energetic, and I have all the time in the world. That's difficult to wrap my brain around.
Yeah. But, you know, it is hard to get your brain around it. But Lisa's leaders, you know, as I said, if you don't have energy, you can't give energy. And as leaders, we really need to give energy to our people. And it's sort of like, I mean, I remember having a conversation with Judy Marks, and, you know, the CEO, any leader really is the barometer for, and the temperature for everybody around them. You know, if you're running hot, everybody else is probably going to run hot as well. So as difficult as that is, I think it's a leadership capability. It's not easy. But my suggestion is just try to pick off a few things and try it and see what kind of result it is. Kind of like you're doing your bulleting, right? Over time. It's like any habit. Has anybody read Atomic Habits by James Clear? That's a great, yeah, you have Mario. It's a great book, and it really is the notion of 1% difference. Just 1% difference. And over time, that makes a huge impact. So all you have to worry about is a 1% improvement in your efforts. So that's what I would encourage you. I'm going to leave you with this quote and then do the what's next. And because I realize we're running out of time here. Let me get this. I don't know if you ever read the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. It's not about how to get more things done. It's about getting the right things done. And I think we started out with that prioritization. We always recognize birthdays. Sonia isn't with us, but if you see Sonia, her birthday was on the 3rd. And here's what we have for what's next. September 14th, Cultivating a Growth Mindset is one of your sessions. Then creating resiliency and agility. And then finally on October 30th, we have the sponsor panel from some of the other senior sponsors in this. So with that, just would love to thank Joe and Mario for all that great stories and insights and coming from a senior leader perspective. I think we all know that capacity and energy are actually pretty darn important and easy to do, right, Mario and Joe?
Yeah, piece of cake.
All right, we all struggle with it, but great, everyone. Thanks for your input. Take 2 or 3 things away with you, and I bet you'll see some difference in some way. So I'll look forward to seeing you at the next session. And again, everybody, have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.